We're all about easy here at Blue Collar Bobbers, and I like to make things real simple and easy and fun. And I've come up with a way to make these transitioning these front signal lights to the little smaller, more inset ones a lot easier than what I originally anticipated. And then also, what I like is this headlight. It's really nice and it's super easy to work with. So the first thing we want to do, we want to grab a towel, just so we can put it on the fender there. And then let's get started. Now we've got to remove this headlight ring from this headlight bucket. It's super easy on this bike. There's a screw under here and here. We just remove those. And that's what they look like. Now make sure we keep these, don't lose these. Keep them in a safe spot. Then the next thing we do, we just pop the top of the headlight out like that. And lift up on the bottom and it'll come out. Now that's why we have this towel here. We're going to lay the headlight right here. We could disconnect the connector here, but sometimes they're really stiff, and we'll just leave the headlight here for now because it's going to be super easy to do it with it right there. Now later on, just for your own reference too, if you do need to replace the headlight bulb, just unplug the connector right back here. You work it a little bit and it comes out, and then you can replace that. Before we remove this signal light, we're going to cut this wire down here. It's the wire that comes right out of the signal light. So just go ahead and snip that off right there. Make sure your key's off. And there you have it. And then we'll go ahead and take these off. I've rotated this signal light out of the way, but this is the Allen screw that you take out on the back. And then just open the rubber flange and they'll come right off. Okay, remove the signal light from the other side, and then what we want to do one side of these wires at a time. It'll be a little easier to keep them straight. So what I want you to reach up inside the bucket, and there's kind of like a clamp up in there that you can release, and it'll let you pull this bundle of wires out a little further toward the front. And if you'll notice, there's some blue and white wires here, blue and white, blue and green. We're going to do that first. That's this side. So go ahead and pull that wire through the back and then out the front. And this is the wire. This is the wire that was on the left signal light. There again, it's the blue and white ones. And we're going to do this wire first. You can leave the other side in. That's the orange one. Okay, now it's time to put the fork signal light clamps on the upper forks here. What we do is we put the flange to the top and the bolt to the bottom, the U-bolt to the bottom. And what we're going to do, we're going to let this just rest on this shelf here of the triple clamp once it's installed all the way. So I'm going to rotate this around. It doesn't really matter too much, but what I've done is I've put the bent bracket on the back toward the fork, and then the flat bracket I put next, and then the nuts. I think it looks a little cleaner that way. That way you don't see that flat piece. So bent piece against the forks, flat piece, and then the nuts. Let me back this off a little bit. Now the most important thing is that we tighten these bolts about the same amount each time. You should have about the same amount of threads here and here. If you don't, then the U-bolt will be cocked in there crooked. So what you do is you go ahead and get those even to where there's a little bit of drag. Then go ahead and we'll position that back where it goes. We're going to leave this just a little bit loose. It looks like there's a bent wire thing in the back, so I'll deal with that in just a minute. But we want to make these even. I'm going to deal with that thing in the back there. Okay, easy fix. I just bent that wire thing toward the back a little bit to get it so that this will rotate all the way in there. So just push that in a little bit. It bends real easily. And then we want this to be straight forward. Now don't worry about it too much right now. We'll just kind of snug it up and get it to where it's kind of semi-tight, and this is sitting on the shelf. And then we'll mount the light, and then we can tighten these last. Okay, here's that beautiful black nickel light again. Now there's a bigger washer, or bigger spacer that goes on the front, so make sure you don't use one, try to use one that's on the back. And also amber lights on the front. So again, we'll take the bolt out. What we're going to do, we're going to put the bolt and the washers in first. Bolt, lock washer, washer. Okay, then we'll put the large flange part, the large flange against the bracket with small toward the light, and then we'll just screw that into the light. Okay, I'll show you in a minute how we tighten all this stuff up. I've installed both lights. Now go ahead and tighten the light up itself. Make sure that it points straight forward. There again, don't tilt them because they don't look as good. They need to be perpendicular to the ground, just like the rears. Then they'll look a lot nicer. And then when you tighten the U-bolts, make sure you go back and forth, back and forth. Now, it's really important that you don't get those super tight, because as you tighten that, this bracket will actually bend a little bit. It seems kind of bad, but in a way it's really good, because what happens is it kind of puts a spring tension on the U-bolt, which keeps the nuts from loosening up, and it also makes it so that the lights, you don't have to tighten it too tight. There again, back and forth, just feel it till it's nice and snug. Don't get too carried away. And we do give you an extra U-bolt with some nuts in it, just in case you do snap one, but if you snap it, it's way too tight. And that spring action will also keep that light from swiveling. It makes it really nice and tight. Okay, we're going to go ahead and hook up these wires next. Okay, I've spliced the wires on the left side, the blue side. I did this ahead of time just to make sure everything worked out okay. And then I'm going to show you how to do the orange side, which is the left side of the bike. So what I did is I ran the wire from the back of the signal light through the back of the bucket back here, through this hole, and then out the front. So this is this signal light wire. And then this is the wire harness inside the bike. These are the orange wires, orange and green. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure about 6 inches. So about 6 inches there. Move this down a little bit. Okay, we're going to measure from the where they plug in to about 6 inches. You can hold the wires together. And we're going to cut the wires at about the 6-inch spot. This should give us enough wire to work with to splice these together. Okay, I've exposed about 2.5 inches of the wire coming out of the bike itself. You can take a scissors and cut this sheathing on the outside on the bike itself, and then to expose these wires. There's an orange and white stripe, and green. The green is the ground. And then this is the wires coming out of the signal light. On this, what I do is I just take a little knife and I slit that, cut that outside a little bit, and then you can pry it apart and pull it down to expose these wires. And on the signal lights, there should be a purple, a blue, and a black. Make sure the light's really good on this, because sometimes it's a little bit hard to tell which color's which. So go ahead and do that, and then when you get to hooking these up, when you start hooking these up, we'll give you instructions, written instructions. This isn't the instruction sheet, this is for something else, but we're going to give you an instruction sheet that'll show you which wires to hook up, and you'll want to have that by your side when you hook these up, because it's really critical that you get these correct. Let's hook them up. We're going to do one at a time. Okay, I stripped the ends of these back about a 1/4 inch or 3/8, and I went ahead and put these small butt splicers, just crimp the wire ends on all three. That way they're ready to slide the wires on the other ends. Now, don't jump ahead on this thinking, oh, I'll just hook these up, because it's really important that we follow a sequence. So let's do one at a time. I'll show you how to do it. Okay, I've stripped the end of the wire. Now, it's really important what we need to do. We need to slide the some small pieces of heat shrink over the wires before we butt splice these together, because after you do it, you can't put the heat shrink on. So put the heat shrink on first. I cut pieces about 1.5 inches long. This is really nice heat shrink too. It's the adhesive type. So once you get this spliced together, the glue in this will stick the wires together really nicely. So anyway, the most important wire is the green coming out of the bike itself. So we're going to go ahead and hook that into the black on the motorcycle, or on the signal light, excuse me. So green to black. I'm going to go ahead and crimp that. Okay, got a good crimp there. Now we can go ahead and slide this heat shrink over it, and I'm going to heat shrink the wire. So I'm going to do one at a time. There again, pay close attention to the colors on this. Refer to that sheet of paper because you don't want to mix these up. Okay, I'm finished. Gosh, all the lights work well. They work well as running lights and signals. So there again, follow your sheet of paper closely when you hook these wires up, because if you get them wrong, then you'll have to snip them and start all over. One thing you'll ask yourself too, why don't we take these connectors apart here and then just do them off on the bench like we did the back? But the problem is with that is some of these times these connectors are so tight in there, and sometimes you'll actually pull the end of the connector off. These bikes sit for years and years, and they get really tight. So this is actually a kind of nice way to do it. And then I guess later on, if you had to change a light or something, you could go ahead and take these connectors off to change a light or something. But anyway, we're basically hardwired in doing this way, and it works out really nicely. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this thing back together and show you how to do that. And we want to route the wires and stuff so that they look real nice. Now what I did is I ran the wires behind the forks, and then I put a couple of wire ties right on this very bottom bracket that holds the headlight. There's a place you can loop the wire tie through and wire tie those wires there. That way they can just run directly up into the bucket. And then make sure when you turn the bike that the wires don't hit those stops. You don't want to hit the stops and have them shear the wires off. And then go ahead and put your bucket back on. Before I did that, I stuffed all the wires back in there and kind of looped that little loop around inside. There's a little kind of a wire loop that holds the wires kind of back in the bucket. There's a lot of room in that bucket there, so you shouldn't have a problem. And then just go ahead and hook your 2 screws back in here, and the headlight is ready to go along with those much more slender signal lights. Double check everything.